You are listening to the Coins, Currency, and American History podcast, presented by Littleton Coin Company.
Every great civilization leaves behind its ruins, its art, and its heroes. But the story of America can be told through something smaller, something we can hold in our hands. A coin. Coins are the fingerprints of a nation. This is the story of the United States of America. From colonies to social experiment to global economic leader.
The early 1820s were supposed to be a time of unity. President James Monroe toured the nation to cheering crowds. Newspapers praised the dawn of an age without bitter party politics. America, for the first time since independence, looked calm, stable, and confident. Historians later called it the era of good feelings. But beneath the surface, the country was anything but unified. The Panic of 1819 had shattered financial innocence. Three regional economies, the industrial North, the plantation South, and the expanding West were drifting further apart. Americans were optimistic on the outside and anxious on the inside. And at this moment of internal fragility, the United States made one of the boldest statements in its early history. A statement not about banks or land or internal improvements, but about the entire Western Hemisphere. This was the Monroe Doctrine. It was a line in the sand, a global announcement from a nation that still wasn't sure of itself. To understand why Monroe spoke up, we need to look beyond the borders of the United States. Across Central and South America, centuries-old empires were crumbling. Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Argentina, each individually declared independence from Spain. Entire kingdoms vanished in a decade. European monarchies watched nervously as new republics replaced old crowns. To many in Europe, the revolutions looked like a dangerous echo of the American and French rebellions. And they were real concerns whispered in royal courts that Europe might intervene to restore Spain's colonies. A return of European power to the Americas would reshape the world, and the United States knew it. This wasn't just a foreign crisis, it was a philosophical one. Would the new world belong to the people who lived in it, or to the monarchies who once claimed it? More than 3 centuries earlier, in 1494, the Pope had divided the unexplored world between Spain and Portugal in the Treaty of Tordesillas, a single sweeping declaration that carved the globe into imperial zones of influence. Monroe was not repeating that act. He was rejecting it. If the old world once believed it could draw lines across continents from afar, the United States now asserted the opposite. The New World was no longer available for division by outsiders. The age of European claims in the Americas was over. It was less a declaration of authority than a declaration of independence, not for the United States alone, but for the entire hemisphere. In December 1823, Monroe delivered his annual message to Congress. Inside it were a few carefully placed paragraphs that would echo across generations. 1. No new European colonization in the Western Hemisphere. The Americas were closed permanently. 2. Any attempt to influence or control independent American nations would be seen as a threat to the United States. The U.S. would not tolerate interference, political or military. 3. In exchange, the United States pledged to avoid European conflicts, no involvement in their wars, their politics, or their rivalries. It was a simple, elegant framework, a boundary for the New World, a philosophy for the next century. But there was a problem. The United States had no power to enforce it. Textbooks sometimes portray the Monroe Doctrine as immediately effective. It wasn't. Its early success had little to do with American strength and everything to do with European distraction. Britain had no interest in seeing Spain or France reclaim their far-flung colonies because British merchants wanted open markets. Russia, Prussia, and Austria were preoccupied with revolutions closer to home. Spain lacked the military capacity to rebuild its empire. France was still recovering from Napoleon and rebuilding its own government. In short, Europe had no time, no money, and no appetite for new adventures in the Americas. So Monroe's bold statement wasn't challenged, not because it was feared, but because it was inconvenient. Yet because no one pushed against it, the doctrine stood, and standing, it gained legitimacy. It would be decades before the United States had the military power to enforce Monroe's words, but the idea survived long enough to become real. In the decades after Monroe, the U.S. population surged, industry expanded, northern factories multiplied, Western settlement accelerated, the Navy modernized, and the nation grew stronger. The Monroe Doctrine transformed. What began as an aspirational warning became a strategic reality. The Western Hemisphere would develop without European influence, and the United States would be the central power within it. The doctrine would eventually guide U.S. diplomacy, justify interventions, and shape the country's identity as a hemispheric leader. But in 1823, it was still just an idea, a promise spoken by a nation not yet capable of keeping it, which makes its timing all the more striking. The United States were projecting confidence abroad precisely because it felt insecure at home. Inside the country, the North was becoming a hard currency, wage-driven industrial economy. The South was deepening into a cotton-based credit system tied to slavery. The West was exploding with opportunity, risk, and resentment. 3 systems, 3 economies, 3 visions for America. The Monroe Doctrine painted a picture of national unity and purpose, a single voice declaring the destiny of a hemisphere. But internally, the nation was becoming a house divided, slowly drifting toward an argument that would soon become unavoidable. The doctrine announced stability to the outside world because America was struggling to find it within its own borders. A new voice in the world. The Monroe Doctrine marked the moment the United States stepped onto the global stage, not as a colony, not as an experiment, but as a nation claiming a sphere of influence. A young republic telling the old empires that their age was over. Yet even as America drew a bold line around the hemisphere, the lines within its own borders were deepening. Lines between regions, economies, and worldviews, lines that could not be ignored forever. Half a world away, monarchies were losing their grip. At home, America was losing its unity. The next era would not be defined by foreign policy, but by a struggle over money, power, and the meaning of democracy itself. From the ashes of the Panic of 1819 rises a new political force, one that distrusts banks, elites, and centralized power. Next time, the age of Jackson and the coming war over America's financial future. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Coins, Currency, and American History podcast presented by Littleton Coin Company. You can find out more about coins and currency in our free Learn Center at www.littletoncoin.com/learn. It's filled with fascinating facts about U.S. coins, world coins, ancient coins, paper money, and more, as well as helpful tips for collectors of all levels. You'll even find free collector guides, checklists, and virtual albums to help you get started and keep track of your growing collection. And while you're there, be sure to check out our online store. Visit www.littletoncoin.com today.